All right, just left the gym, going on a little nature walk. Take a moment, talk to you about your limiting beliefs, my limiting beliefs, and why they're even called limiting beliefs. So, limiting beliefs aren't true. And that's a hard pill to swallow for most people. Certainly a hard pill for me to swallow when I first started discovering that, or when I first learned that. And somebody who shared that, or shares it in great depth, is David Bear. Look him up on YouTube. He also has a really good book called A Changed Mind. To me, it is the most easy to understand book about the way you create your reality with your thoughts. You know, there are books like Think and Grow Rich, probably the most famous one. Very dense, kind of hard to understand. And there's a reason why Napoleon Hill advises you to take it one chapter per week. There's a reason. I blew through it the first time and had to go through it several more times. And even still, I would have done better just by reading David Bear's A Changed Mind. But this episode on my channel is about limiting beliefs, how you can avoid them, how they're holding you back, and the fact that they're not even true. And so most of our limiting beliefs are created from childhood. And just to give you some of mine, that way I'm not just calling everybody else out, like I'm nobody special. You know, I come from a family, a very modest family. I don't want to say poor, but there were definitely some times where you could probably consider our family poor. But, you know, money was hard to come by. And I heard that a lot. You know, it's like, oh, we don't have the money for this. Oh, we can't have that because it costs too much money. And there were even people in my family who were much older and had their own limiting beliefs that they passed on to me or tried to pass on to me, such as nobody with money can be a good person. You know, money is the root of all evil. They must have cheated or lied or stole to get all that money. Or wealthy people, rich people are greedy, evil. I mean, these were just things that I was kind of taught. And so you can insert it like David says, you know, when I was young, money was blank. And for me, money was hard to get. Money was scarce. Money was limited. There was not that much money in the world, so you probably weren't gonna, you know, even thinking about like how much you can make a year, I think back of when I was a kid, and like to me, making over $100,000 was basically never ever gonna happen and was impossible. Not just for me, but for anybody in my small town. Like I just thought there's no way you can make $100,000. It's just not possible. And so we get programmed with those things. And some of the things too are like, this one's kind of strange. Somebody's screaming in the park. Hope nothing crazy is going down. Anyways, I'm not athletic. I've heard that so many times from different people. And the truth of that one is, if you can move your limbs, you can walk, you can run, you're athletic. What do you mean you're not athletic? You know, another one is, I'm not smart. Like, I'm not very academically smart. I told myself that for the longest time, mainly because I was so creative. And so I just assumed you could only be one thing. And so I would say, you know, I'm not very academic. But the truth is, I'm actually very academic. And since I left college and high school and all that, I have learned so much more because it's on my own terms. You know, I seek the knowledge I want to have. And I find myself being pretty much one of the smartest people that I interact with, not because I'm anything special or anything better than anybody else. It's just like I actually like to learn, and so I seek it. When you seek something, you tend to retain it better. You tend to enjoy learning it better. When you're forced, it never works as good. And I think we know that. If you live in America and in the school system here, you know how that goes. But so my limiting beliefs were money was hard to get. I was never going to be able to make a lot of money. I'm not academic, and those in America go hand in hand. You know, the thing of like, you gotta do good in school if you want to have a lot of money. And that's not totally faulty, because sure, you can be really good in school, go be an aerospace engineer or some kind of doctor or lawyer, and yes, you can make a lot of money. But the people who make the most money in the world are none of those people. I'm just telling you the truth. The richest people on the planet are not engineers, they are not doctors, and they are not lawyers. They're just not. The richest people on the planet don't have a title. Okay, really sit on that for a second. The richest people on the planet do not have an occupational title. They might be CEO of a company, president of an organization, something like that, but you're never going to see engineer. They might have previously been one. That's an interesting thought. You know, they abandoned that to become one of the richest people on the planet. So, you know, software engineer Bill Gates, he's not a software engineer anymore. He hasn't been a software engineer in 35, 40 years. So that's an interesting thing to think about, okay? But let me tell you why your limiting beliefs are not true. They're all up here in your head. Like I said, if you have limbs, you can walk, you can run, you are technically athletic. Go look up the definition of athletic. Okay, the only reason that you're quote unquote not good at different sports or don't perform well when it comes to sports is because you've been telling yourself that you're not athletic. Now, the way this manifested in my life, whenever I discovered this truth, you know, I was living paycheck to paycheck. I didn't have more than $10,000 in my bank account before I was, say, 26, 27 years old. And it had nothing to do with my ability to make money, had nothing to do with my talents, had nothing to do with really anything other than the fact that in my own brain and in my own mind, I told myself that I could not have more money than that. And it was trippy. I'm just going to turn around because there's some kids over there. Don't want to get them on camera. Also, just don't want to talk to them. But whenever I told myself, or when I made the decision, okay, and desire and decision, treat it the same way. If you have a desire, just assume it's a decision. You have a desire to start a business, you have decided to start a business. If you have desire to have $30,000 in your bank account, you've made a decision you will have $30,000 in your bank account. If you'll make those synonymous with each other and don't break on it, don't go back on it, don't worry about the how either. Like, that's the one thing I'm really guilty of is like, you know, I'm like, okay, I want to make over $30,000 this month. And then I start racing in my head unconsciously, subconsciously about how I'm actually going to do it. That's a big mistake because the moment you start doing that, you start finding reasons that you're not going to be able to do it. The main thing is there's no past, there's no future. There's only the present. I mean, that's just true. It's hard to wrap your head around it, you know, if you're just coming into this kind of stuff. But the more you can live in the present moment, and there's also this thing called God, who is infinitely intelligent and has infinite plans for you. You and me, we screw up those plans when we start worrying about the how. How are we going to get it? Or, God, that just seemed, I've heard people say that. I was meeting with somebody the other day at the coffee shop, and she was talking about this house her and her husband want to buy, and she was like, yeah, it's like $380,000. That just seems like an impossible amount of money to pay for a house. Well, as long as she keeps thinking that, and I didn't say it to her because, you know, I just want to go around barking at people, but the more she says that, or if she even says that, it's just going to be true. She's made the decision that that's too much to pay for a house, therefore she's not going to pay for that for a house, therefore the money's not going to come to her or her family probably because they made the decision that that's an outrageous amount of money, right? Henry Ford said it best probably, and I'm sure he stole it from somebody else, but the man who says he can and the man who says he can't are both right. If you say you can do something or if you say you can't do something, you are correct. And that is a pretty profound thing to think about because even in my life, whenever I said I was going to break the chain in my family, not have a job, make over 30 grand a month, or between 15 and 40 was kind of my goal. I made that decision and then I just relaxed. And when I say relaxed, I didn't go whiteboard. I love to whiteboard, by the way, but I didn't go whiteboard. Okay, how am I going to make this money this month and panic about it? I just said, this is what I'm going to do. God's going to use my talents to bring that money. And that's it. The end. And lo and behold, it started happening. Now, there's a little bit of a delayed effect because everything, all the thoughts that are in your brain now will manifest instantly. And that's kind of weird to think about because you're thinking like instant, like the next step I take, I'm a millionaire. No, time doesn't work that way, but it will manifest. It will. And so like I had 2 negative thoughts this morning that I had to kind of check myself on. Those are still going to probably come to fruition. Not the exact thoughts, but it's like when you throw a rock in the river, or in a lake rather, and your consciousness, or you're standing, you know, on the shore. Yes, you threw that rock in, but it does take a little bit for those ripples to come. Okay, and everything's vibrations. I know I'm throwing a lot at you guys this morning, but the key is recognize whenever you go into a state of non-belief or a state of saying, oh, that's impossible or this cannot happen. Because even if you're, I mean, I'm a biblical person, you know, all things are possible through God. There's literally nothing that's impossible. Like that tree could start walking. I can't make that happen, but God can make that happen. There is nothing impossible for God, and your dreams, as big as you see them, they're tiny. They're tiny dreams in the grand scheme of things, and they're nothing for God to bring to you. But you got to get out of your own way. I got to get out of my own way to make this stuff happen. So whenever you go into that state, tell yourself and recognize that it's not true. It is not impossible to get a house that's worth $400,000, $500,000. You know why? Because other people are doing it. Other people that are not as talented, not as smart as you, but they have let go of the resistance. One thing that David does talk about that I really like is that, and he makes this correlation, you know, the equation to get anything you want in this life is desire plus non-resistance. And that's really true. I've witnessed it several times in my own life, that whenever I want something and I don't worry about getting it, it comes. Whenever I want something and I'm worried about getting it, it falls short. I don't get it. You know, in my business, that's happened for years. You know, this big client would come with this proposal and oh my gosh, it's $12,000. I really want it, but I can't see a world where they're even gonna consider paying that. Oh my gosh. And they go with somebody else more expensive. They don't go with me because it was too expensive. They do not go with me because my energy was not aligned with that. And the universe, God picks up on that, and it gets transmuted through all space-time. It is trippy to think about. But think about this. If everything's vibrations, you know that sounds technically never go away. So the words you speak about yourself, about your life, about your business, they never actually go away. They get lower and lower and lower. But words that were spoken 200 years ago are still in the airwaves. Mind blown, son. Mind blown. But I love that. So next time you go into that state, recognize that you're in that state. Remind yourself that it's actually not true. And then make a decision that this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna buy a house of my dreams. These are the things I want. Place the order in your mind and then let go of it and be in the present. That could be going on a walk like this. That could be taking your kids to the movies. That could just be, you know, going outside and grilling with your wife. Don't worry about it anymore. Stop trying to control it all. Stop trying to do it all and let God do it. You know, 90% of what you need to do has actually already been done. You just got to place the order and chill out. But all right, I think that's about all I got for you guys. I'm gonna go get a coffee and then I'm gonna go to my office and edit some videos, including